Alright everyone, we're back today to look at the second half of Erasmus's video on creation versus evolution. We left off at the watchmaker argument, which I have never found compelling because the appearance of design is not necessarily indicative of design. What we perceive as design in us and other animals, plants, etc., is an emergent property that comes from the bottom up instead of being directed from the top down. Either way, it does absolutely nothing to disprove evolution. At best, it gets you to a deistic version of God that simply kickstarted life on the planet. Once again, I am not doing this to insult Erasmus's intelligence. I'm trying to help him gain a better understanding of the topics. So if you do visit his channel, be cordial. The sheer length of this next point combined with everything I will have to cover is the main reason that I split this response into two uploads. So let's get started.
Evidence 6. This is a bit of a long point, so get ready. Evolution is illogical. Speaking of common sense, let's talk a little bit about what evolution preaches. Claim 1. Human beings came from monkeys. Now, Charles Darwin, the founder of the religion of evolution...
Sorry, Erasmus, I have to jump in and interrupt you here. I debated on covering the idea that evolution is a religion and decided that it needed to be addressed. No, evolution is not a religion. To clear up this point, I asked you to provide the definition of religion that you use, which is a particular system of faith and worship. The Google search pulls from the Oxford Dictionary. For this explanation, I will use your cited definition in full and the one that I use. Now, evolution explores and investigates how organisms develop and change over time to form the biodiversity that we have on the planet. It makes no mention of any controlling power or a god, so it does not match the main definition at all. To be clear, evolutionary mechanisms are blind and unguided, so they are not a controlling power in that sense. The definition you prefer to use does not apply because the science of evolution, like all fields of science, is not faith-based. And I was pleasantly surprised that we both have similar definitions of faith, with my own being a position held in lieu of evidence or despite evidence to the contrary. Evolution is also not a thing that is worshipped. There is no requirement for reverence or adoration, and no rites or ceremonies to adhere to in evolution. The third one doesn't apply either unless you want to extend the definition of religion to supporting specific football teams, TV shows, or hobbies, and is much too vague to be useful as a result. Now, my definition of religion is the one put forward by Aron Ra, a faith-based belief system positing that some aspect of the self, soul, memories, energy, etc., survives the death of the physical body to carry on in some other form. I find this to be the most accurate definition of religion because it includes all religions, including those without a creator deity, or deities at all for that matter, and they all posit the notion that you will live on in some form after the death of the physical body. Literally no aspect of evolutionary biology addresses or even mentions any aspect of that definition, so it doesn't meet the most inclusive and frankly accurate definition of a religion I have ever heard. I also need to point out that this is a false dichotomy. This isn't a case of either accept the science and reject God or believe in God and reject the science. I need to point out that some of the most knowledgeable people and the most ardent supporters of evolution from the fields of evolutionary biology, paleontology, and geology, and so on, are Christians themselves. They understand the relevant evidence and know how to prove evolution and see it as the mechanism that God used to have the earth bring forth after its kind or whatnot. I don't personally hold that position, but I also don't have a problem with it, because it doesn't reject every objectively verifiable metric that we have showing evolution indeed happens and has happened. So now that we've covered that, we can move on.
Claim that human beings came from monkeys. Did he provide evidence for this claim? His evidence is that monkeys kind of resemble a person. This idea on its face is absurd, and it's barely even worth mentioning, but I have to. A vocal minority passionately believes this claim to be true. These are the people who are voting. Yeah.
Darwin did not claim we came from monkeys in the sense that modern monkeys birthed humans. But even then, we knew that we were similar to other apes. Remember, Linnaeus had a century prior classified man as an ape and apes as human, because he literally could not find a trait unique to humans to distinguish man from ape and challenge the scientific community of his day to show him one. A challenge that has never been answered, by the way. Remember last time when we talked about morphology and how clades are nested hierarchies? We're coming back to that because I need to talk about one more term, synapomorphies. A synapomorphy is a characteristic shared by all members of a clade. If it is inherited by descendant groups, it is a derived synapomorphy. The presence of these traits in descendant lineages means that they can be placed as having a common ancestor. Remember that clades are defined with core commonalities such as dentition, temporal fenestra, digits on each extremity, skeletal structures, etc., with each clade encompassing literally dozens of species. Now, your use of the word monkey in this case is kind of vague, but based on your comments in the next point that you make, you're thinking of things like spider monkeys, which are classified as New World monkeys, being exclusive to the Americas and in the clade Platyrini. There is another clade of monkeys called Old World monkeys, also known as Catarrhini, which are exclusive to Africa and Eurasia. There are several differences between the two. New World monkeys have strong prehensile tails, while Old World monkeys have small, weak tails, or they are completely absent, as is the case with us. New World monkeys have more claw-like nails, while Old World monkeys have flattened fingernails like we do. There are also differences in dentition, with New World monkeys having one more premolar than Old World monkeys, and that dental pattern in Old World monkeys matches our own. The primary difference, though, is the placement of the nostrils. New World monkeys have nostrils that are splayed out to the side, while Old World monkeys have nostrils that are pointed down, like ours. I'm aware that this alone won't be enough to convince you, so let's go a little further up the cladogram to Hominoidea. This is where we find the ancestors to all modern apes. They aren't as big as what we usually think of when we think of apes, but there are diagnostic characteristics here that we share with them, such as a lessened olfactory or scenting ability and a tendency toward bipedality and no tails. The commonalities are so overwhelmingly obvious that, as I already said, Linnaeus could not tell the difference between us at a taxonomic classification level. But that still may not be enough, so let's go forward again to Hominidae. This clade is also known as the great apes. So what makes us great apes? For one, great apes are larger than the lesser apes, but there's more to it than just that. For one, great apes have more sparse hair. Even though the other apes appear to have more hair than we do, we actually have the same number of hair follicles all over our bodies. But our hair does not grow in as long or as thick. Great apes also have a truly impressive brain size to body mass compared with any other animal on the planet, and we talked a little bit about that before. As a result, they, like we, have the most complex social structure of any animal on the planet. Dentition comes into play here again, with great apes not only sharing our dental pattern, including the vestiges of the canines that we have as well, it's the molars that are common as well. Let me explain. The pattern of the molars that great apes have is a very specific pattern and is shared with no other animal on this planet. Only great apes have this pattern. 5 points interrupted with a Y-shaped crevice. But you may need more evidence than just dentition. So moving up to Hominidae, the most interesting commonality is that all apes in this clade have uniquely identifying fingerprints. There are only two real main clades before we get up to sapiens, but I think you can see where this is going. So to recap, since nothing can grow out of its ancestry, we didn't come from monkeys. We are still monkeys today. As always, I can focus on particular aspects of this in the future. I'm simply trying to give as brief an overview as possible, so I am omitting quite a bit because we are talking about 3.5 billion years of paleo history and more than 50 named clades in our distinct lineage alone.
All life forms are related to each other. It's a claim too. Now I can understand this claim, the claim human beings came from monkeys to an extent, because monkeys do sort of vaguely look human, aside from the tail and the fact that they're covered in hair. What I don't understand at all is the claim that human beings are related to literally everything that is alive on Earth. Pigs, dogs, cats, fish, bacteria, mushrooms, and trees. How could a human being be related to a tree? Human beings reproduce with sexual intercourse, while trees and other plants produce seeds from pollination. Trees don't move, they don't have blood, they don't have organs, and they get their energy from the sun. And don't even get me started on the idea that we are related to a single-cell organism like bacteria.
Again, cladistics provides an explanation to how all life is related, but I can see how being related to plants and such can seem far-fetched. So let's take a trip down the cladogram again to the first three main clades: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. These are the crowns or roots of everything on the planet because everything falls into one of these three clades. Now, the common ancestor for these clades is hard to nail down because there was a lot of horizontal gene transfer going on when they formed, so we can't say that we evolved from bacteria because things like that muddy the water, so to speak, and there was no clear descendant ancestor relationship. Prior to this, the relationships look more like a tangled web than the tree we have been seeing so far. We came back this far in the cladogram to address you having a hard time with the idea of plants being related to us. Remember that animals are any multicellular organism with a digestive tract that must ingest and digest other organisms to survive. And also remember that it applies to us as well. We are also classified as eukaryotes because the defining trait of that clade is a cell with DNA and a nucleus with membrane-bound organelles. All of our cells meet that definition. Even our blood cells initially have a nucleus. That also applies to plants as well. And we diverged from that point, going our separate directions, including how we reproduce. Fungi are as far removed from us as plants are. Pigs, dogs, and cats are all mammals like us, and fish are separated from us since the first stegocephalians came along, which we will discuss here in just a moment.
Claim 3. A fish crawled out of the ocean. Fish, as you know, don't have legs. Fish have fins, which are ideal for swimming. If you get the impression that I'm speaking like a person would speak to a child, you would be correct. Anybody that believes that an organism like a fish would have any inclination to use its fins to crawl around on land has the intelligence of a child. Evolutionists claim that these changes happen over a long period of time. In other words, the changes these species experience is gradual. So how could two pairs of legs evolve gradually? An animal either has legs or it doesn't. Anything in between wouldn't be ideal on land or in the sea. So how could it have lived long enough to have offspring?
Taxonomy is a rather in-depth and fascinating subject, but the word fish is one of those imprecise taxonomic labels we haven't really used in a long time now. Stegocephalians already had lungs and gills. What had been a swim bladder to control buoyancy had been heavily vasculated by this point, so they could breathe on land, much like landscids, mudskippers, and snakeheads do. But they also had developed shoulders and the beginnings of arms and hands. These extremely primitive structures allowed them to hold themselves in place in wetland areas because they had moved from the ocean inland up river systems into marshes, swamps, and similar habitats. They had not only paired pectoral fins, but also paired pelvic fins connected to a primitive but functional pelvis, with that connected to the spine by a rib-like structure. The best example of this is Tiktaalik. It had a neck, elbows, wrists, and the beginning of fingers. We can see this through the comparison of organisms developing in embryo, as the same genes for fin rays are also the ones for phalanges and tetrapods. This structure would be favored in swampy habitats, which would involve maneuvering around debris and help in ambush tactics for hunting. From that point, it was really no problem to move on to land once they developed keratinized skin, which we have too, by the way, so again, this is a sign of common ancestry. I've said before that visualizing evolution is like looking at a tree with branches forking off. When it comes to visualizing the descent of one particular path, though, there's a better analogy that works. It's best to visualize that as taking daily snapshots of yourself from birth on to present day. From day to day, each individual image isn't really different. You can't really tell the differences. It's only when you look at images that are 6 months or more apart, really, that you see the changes. And this is much the same manner that evolution happens. It's just incremental, usually subtle changes in proportion that build on fundamental similarities that were there before.
Claim 4. Dinosaurs grew wings and turned into birds. For an evolutionist, the answer to the question of what happened to the dinosaurs is just as ridiculous as you would expect. The same people that claim a fish can spontaneously grow legs, claim that dinosaurs sprouted wings and became the chickens that we know and love today. It's claims like this that really make my head hurt, but I'll try to do my best to be as rational as possible. Evolution of flight has never once been observed in any species that inhabits the Earth today. So you would expect to hear some extraordinary evidence for this extraordinary claim, considering that's what you hear from atheists and alike. But not only will you not hear extraordinary evidence, you won't hear any evidence at all. All of these claims are dumb for their own reasons, but together I think they present a pretty compelling case for evolution being illogical.
For this bit, we need to clarify something. There were several clades of dinosaurs, including sauropods, quadrupedal dinosaurs, and theropods, bipedal dinosaurs. The sauropods went extinct after the KT extinction event, and maniraptor theropods survived. Setting aside that as of the scripting of this video, you have released one saying why you believe dinosaurs did not exist, a topic I will get to eventually, we will proceed under the assumption that fossils are indeed real and have been precisely dated. We will do that because, frankly, I don't have the time to get into it right now. So let's talk about how dinosaurs became birds. Dinosaurs were not slow, lumbering lizards. We know from fossils like those of Archaeopteryx and others that all Maniraptor dinosaurs had feathers. The feather structure provides great insulation, much better than fur actually, and can dissipate heat much easier as well. These dinosaurs started off with simple pycnofibers that eventually became downy double-veined feathers. This isn't the only common trait though. They had the same shaped pelvis, hollow bones, four-chambered hearts, the same type of reproduction and eggs as modern birds. Once again, science is a self-correcting process, adjusting as new information comes in. As a child in the late 80s and early 90s, I remember seeing pictures of artistic renderings of Oviraptor in particular, which at the time was thought to steal eggs and eat them, and was rendered as a reptile like the Velociraptor from Jurassic Park, which was actually Deinonychus. Velociraptors weren't much bigger than turkeys, but they were still dangerous. Anyway, all that changed when the fossils of this dinosaur were found with feathers, which meant that prior fossils of that dino around nests weren't from it stealing the eggs. The whole time it had been incubating them. As we already discussed, feathers are great insulation, so they allowed the incubation of larger clutches. Looking at this cladogram, we can see some of the transitions. There's a lot to take in here, but as you can see, we are looking at a progressive transition of what are known as paraaves, extremely primitive birds that still show dinosaur traits like clawed hands, tails, and beaks with teeth. We move pretty steadily through Confuciusornis, Hesperornis, and Ichthyornis until we get to things like Rhohonavis. Even the experts can't tell if it's what we would consider a bird, but they still know that it's a dinosaur regardless. After that, we move into the clade Neorniths, which has a couple of clades in particular we need to see: paleonades and neonades. Paleonades are things like ostriches and emus. They retain so many primitive traits that they are close in appearance to what we would consider dromaeosaurs. Neoaves are new birds and consist of what we commonly think of as birds like chickens, eagles, ravens, etc. Neoaves did not descend from paleoaves. As I said, they are nested in the same clade, Neorniths. Neoaves split further into birds of prey, gamefowl, and a couple of other clades, but that should cover it. Kind of like that little chestnut that all ducks are birds, but not all birds are ducks. Not all dinosaurs are birds, but all birds are dinosaurs. We don't need to physically observe organisms developing flight when we have evidence that the later dinosaurs like Rhohonavis could fly. Birds capable of flight have a deep-keeled sternum to attach those powerful flight muscles to. There are very few reasons to have such a structure except for that purpose, which is why we find it in these fossil specimens, and was evidently inherited by neoaves. Not to sound insulting here, but it seems like you're letting your incredulity have a pretty tight hold on you. I'll link a video that I did on the incredulity fallacies below.
Evidence 7. The morality of evolution. And last but not least, because I feel it's worth mentioning, the most famous people who actually ascribe to the view of Darwin. First, obviously Darwin himself was a follower of his own religion, but I bring him up for a very important reason. Darwin was a racist and a sexist, which makes all the people who follow his religion hypocrites for calling everyone who thinks differently sexist and racist. This is an excerpt from an article I found. The link will once again be in the description for anyone that is interested. Darwin was, after all, a man of his time, class, and society. True, he was committed to a monogenic rather than the prevailing polygenic view of human origins, but he still divided humanity into distinct races according to their differences in skin, eye, or hair color. He was also convinced that evolution was progressive, and that the white races, especially the Europeans, were evolutionarily more advanced than the black races, thus establishing race differences in racial hierarchy. Darwin's views on gender, too, were utterly conventional. He stated that the result of sexual selection is for men to be more courageous, pugnacious, and energetic than women, with a more intermediate, with an inventive genius, His brain is absolutely larger. The formation of her skull is said to be intermediate between the child and the man. Darwin, 1871. Although female choice explains sexual selection, it is the males who evolve in order to meet the chosen criteria of strength and power. Such 19th century differentiation between the sexes was crucial in providing an alleged biological basis for the superiority of the male. Let me just quickly list off a few other people who believe in social Darwinism. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, Mao Zedong, Saddam Hussein, Genghis Khan. All of these men thought they were superior to other people and that their race should be the dominant race, of course with themselves at the top of the hierarchy.
Every damn time I respond to... One sec. Okay. I have a sneaking suspicion about where these claims are coming from, but I won't speculate. Setting aside for the moment that evolutionary biology does explain moral behavior in species, we'll go in order here, starting with Darwin. Darwin was not sexist or racist. He was incredibly progressive for his time and often praised those of other races like Tahitians and such, and defined savages by their actions, not by their color. He abhorred slavery in all its forms, and the closest comments people can cite for him being a racist are quote mines where he used the common parlance of his time, which was used throughout academia and among everyday people. Though it has been some time since I have read Darwin's work, I can remember no point where he stated what you say about his being a racist. As for being sexist, the excerpt you provided is taken out of context, where he is talking about the dimorphism between men and women, with men having developed to defend the women and the children, thus become larger and more imposing, while the women stayed close to the children and foraged. Your source may not agree with me on this, but I have been in this debate arena long enough to know that this is the result of quote mines, because his opinions were firmly put to bed in Darwin's other works. I find it concerning that he doesn't mention The Voyage of the Beagle, Darwin's first book, as if Origin of Species as his only work. There is a distinction to be made here between social Darwinism and what was known at the time as Darwinism. See, natural selection is a literally heartless, mindless, and brutal process. People like the guys you list took the idea and applied it to politics, which is not how Darwin's theory was ever meant to be applied, since political structures aren't biology. Hitler was a creationist, specifically a Catholic who did not like Darwin's work. In fact, he had all of Darwin's works burnt, and was clear in his speeches and quotations that species fall within limited kinds, among other creationist points that he held, but creationists don't recognize their own arguments coming out of Hitler's mouth. His push for purity and superiority isn't Darwinian either, and was driven by his religious convictions. Evolution teaches that purity causes congenital defects, and that superiority is a factor determined by the environment. Darwin's theory and Hitler's philosophy could not be more different. Stalin rejected Darwin's theory in favor of a form of Lamarckism, and executed or gulagged anyone teaching Darwinian theory. None of the people you listed promoted Darwinian evolution or evolution in general to further their politics, Certainly not Genghis fucking Khan. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, and others creationists often cite either rejected evolution or did not know what evolution was. This is a key point that I need you to understand and stop repeating, because whoever you got this from was, in every sense of the word, lying to you. And if necessary, I will devote a whole upload to proving that point beyond reasonable doubt if you want. Now, evolution does actually promote morality in social species. In any community, you have to get along and cooperate with each other to survive. You can't function as a society if you constantly piss off or fuck over everyone in the eyes of your peers. Doing so will get you imprisoned, banished, or outright killed. Thus, there is a strong selective pressure to develop empathy for our family, friends, and fellows, which is why collectively morals are improving as we discard outdated notions and see all people as equally part of a human tribe, so to speak, and not subhuman. That's why slavery is now illegal worldwide and why rape is a felony, neither of which God properly addressed at all. Now, as of this recording, I have told you that I generally make it a rule not to present myself as aggressive or condescending, and I need you to bear in mind that my frustration here is not born of any disagreement with you personally. As I've already said, I see you as a victim of bad information, and my anger is directed at those who fed you that information with deliberate intent to deceive you. This is why I advocate exploring both sides of any issue, so that you can make an informed decision instead of staying in an echo chamber. And yes, I have explored both sides in depth. I encourage you to do the same. Though it may be uncomfortable to do so, you cannot make an informed decision any other way. The next video of yours I will be covering is the one you did on the flat earth, as I need to lay proper foundations before I get into the video of the Bible being the literal word of God. Until then, I encourage you to dig a bit deeper, and if you have any questions or comments, I will be happy to address them to the best of my ability, even if it takes other videos to do that.